Hello once again and thank you for joining us. Let me ask you something. What if the most dangerous pollution in our cities is coming from cars that look perfectly fine? Cars that start, cars that move, cars that pass roadworthy checks, but are quietly pumping poison into the air. Well, across Ghana's cities, a small metal part is disappearing from under our cars. Sometimes it's stolen. Sometimes it's removed on purpose. That part is the catalytic converter, a device designed to clean toxic gases before they enter the air we breathe. Without it, a vehicle becomes what one expert calls a poison pipe. Today, we follow two journalists, one in Accra, the other in Kumasi, who uncovered how missing converters are fueling crime, worsening air pollution, and silently harming the people who spend their lives in traffic. This is the Clean Air Report Ghana, your weekly deep dive into the air we breathe, the systems that shape it, and the human stories hidden inside the exhaust. I am your host, Michael Ashale. My guests today are Caleb Ahinakwa and Mahmoud Mohammed Nuruddin, both journalists and New Narratives Clean Air Fellows. Their investigations reveal two sides of the same crisis: catalytic converters stolen in Accra and deliberately removed in Kumasi. Caleb and Nuruddin, thank you very much for sitting with us. Caleb, let's start in Accra, where traffic crawls, engines idle, and millions breathe exhaust daily. What is the air pollution situation like right now, and what pushed you to look under people's cars?
The air pollution situation is really that bad and very terrible, simply because a lot of these vehicles that use these routes emit a lot of carbon that clearly, contribute to so much of the pollution we see in the atmosphere. And back to the point as to what led me or pushed me to investigate this. Well, I'm a driver for starters, and by being a driver, I mean I own a vehicle. And prior to this, I had a little knowledge around why a catalytic converter, a very small part of the car, was very important for the vehicle. In fact, I don't know of any other organization that does that, where they clean your vehicle to reduce the carbon emissions it does bring out. And by doing that, they need what we call a catalytic converter. So the first time I went to carbon cleaning in Ghana, they told me that they cannot clean my vehicle. I was like, I have bought my car. What do you mean by you cannot clean my vehicle? I wasn't there alone. There was a guy who I later inserted in the story who came with a Honda. He drives a Honda. So there was my vet and there was the Honda beside me. And I was like, I'm paying. He says, no, it's not about the money. It's because I don't have a small engine part known as a catalytic converter. It is missing in my car. And I wanted to know more. And I was intrigued because when I bought this car, I didn't know that it came or it must come with a catalytic converter. Then he went to the other guy who had a Honda. He also tried cleaning his. The guy too doesn't have a catalytic converter. So the two of us on that same day didn't have a catalytic converter. And so we then decided to, interrogate, but I asked the price. I said it was a very high price. And so, well, just so I don't talk so much, this is just a foundation to which led me to investigate more and tell the story about catalytic converters in vehicles.
In your story, you introduced us to Isaac Pepra, a man who didn't even know what a catalytic converter was until his was stolen. Why was his experience so important to telling this story?
Well, so very important because Isaac was the individual I met at Carbon Cleaning Ghana some months ago. And well, I decided to take his number, and I only decided to tell his story and reach out to him through the staff at Carbon Cleaning Ghana. It was very important to tell his story because, and just so people appreciate the fact that catalytic converters are not just missing from public transport. Now, you see how rickety a lot of these public transports are. It makes a lot of sense to have to know that these vehicles do not have certain parts. They are walking on the road. Some people even do not have steering wheels. So people will not be surprised if you tell them that, oh, that car doesn't have a catalytic converter. It is pretty normal. It is no news. But then it becomes news when people find out that a private car owner who doesn't, drive his car anyhow ends up losing his catalytic converter. That is why I decided to portray Isaac in that light. He's not an Uber driver, he's not a Bolt driver, yes. But so people will appreciate that anyone can fall victim to having his catalytic converter stolen or missing from his car.
You found this wasn't just one unlucky case. Mechanics told you they see this almost every day. Why has catalytic converters become so attractive to thieves?
Well, yes, it's very widespread actually. I mean, eventually I had to go and fix a catalytic converter in my car. I had to save some money for it, and that is to tell you that it's very expensive. And so I would say it's very widespread because speaking to about two or three mechanics, I'm told that they have about usually 10 clients a day complaining about their fuel running down. Now they come with complaints about fuel running down quickly. And for these clients, they are worried. They were wondering how is the fuel running down? Is it that they are buying bad fuel or there's a problem with their car? So they come with the complaints of that, only to be told that because they don't have a catalytic converter.
And just out of curiosity, how much did it cost you to replace yours?
Well, I spent around 1,800 to fix my catalytic converter. And again, let me add that the colleague who I was with, Isaac, on that day also found out the price of the catalytic converter. Now, the price differs from the model of the car. So for someone who is driving a Honda Civic, it was going to be priced higher. And his was around 2,000 plus.
Nuruddin, while Caleb was uncovering theft in Accra, you were reporting in Kumasi and found something slightly different. Is air pollution there just as bad? And what first caught your attention?
Very bad, because one of my lecturers at KNUST did a work with other scientists about schools by roadside, and they realized that the air pollution around these schools were very, very high. And the point was that because vehicles were applied roads in Kumasi, and so the pollution over there was very high. And so we decided to look at what could be the cause of this pollution. And one of the factors that we found out from, or one of the things that the researcher told me was that these cars release more carbon dioxide or even carbon monoxide, which is very dangerous to the human body. Most of the vehicles didn't have catalytic converters.
At Swami Magazine, mechanics told you many drivers are removing their converters themselves. Why are drivers doing this?
Right. So they think that is very expensive one, and they do not see the impact on their vehicles. That is how they see. They do think it has no impact on their vehicles. And some of them claim that without even the catalytic converters, their vehicle moves faster and there is less consumption. So, but the mechanics told me that that was misinformation. And therefore, if you do not have your catalytic converters, it means that you would have a lot more problem to address. And so I decided to go further to speak to someone who had gone to replace his catalytic converter and found out what could have been the reason. And he told me that when he bought his car, he saw that the car was consuming too much fuel. And then there was some kind of noise in the car. So he went to the mechanic, and the mechanic told him that he needed to replace his catalytic converter because it had damage. And so when he replaced it, all the problems that he observed earlier got solved. So you could see that these drivers who do not have their catalytic converters are mostly the taxi drivers who do not themselves own the cars. They don't own the vehicles. And so they decide not to go and replace them because of the cost. But the mechanic also told me that, those who own the vehicles would want to replace them, but there are just few. You count about 100, you have about 20 of them having their catalytic converters intact, but the rest is either damaged or has been stolen, or they don't even want to replace it at all.
Both of you point to the same root cause, money. Caleb, in Accra, converters are stolen and sold. Nuruddin, in Kumasi, they are removed and traded. What exactly is inside this small part that has turned it into a valuable commodity? Nuruddin?
Well, according to one of the engineers at KNUSC, the catalytic converter has some materials that are very expensive. I mean, he mentioned that they are even expensive as gold, and therefore people deliberately cut them off from the vehicle, not really the vehicle owners, but some who have knowledge about these parts do not, steal them. They cut the exhaust pipe and remove it from it. Or you would have the vehicles coming in Ghana here without them. And the parts are very expensive, especially there's one part that I'm trying to remember the name.
If I may,
hopefully, Caleb will remember the name. Yeah.
So we are referring to the rhodium. There's another part called the palladium and the platinum. Exactly. So they are the big three precious metals inside the honeycomb of the catalytic converter. And you know, the rhodium is often the most expensive of the three.
Yeah.
Exactly. And from the expert point of view, they are very, very rare. And in terms of breaking down nitrogen oxide, they actually play a lot of role there. And again, even from research and from what the experts say, even as of late this year, and I'm referring to 2025, that particular material, rhodium, actually it's one of the most valuable traded metals. Okay, and that's just to tell you that it is very priced out there. And the same experts who spoke to me also said the same thing Ruben said. You know, as regards how these metals are often traded at prices higher than gold.
Well, Caleb, one expert in your story described a car without a converter as a poison pipe. In simple terms, what happens to emissions when this part is missing?
Well, a lot happens actually. And in simple terms, again, using the words of the experts I spoke to, experts will say that when this catalytic converter is removed from your car essentially uses, for lack of a better word, a chemical filter. Okay, and this chemical filter or the loss of the chemical filter will increase the amount of the pollutants we already have in the atmosphere, which are obviously directly, we already suffering a lot of PM 2.5 and other pollutants in the air. But when this particular thing is no longer in the car, it increases it. So if it was times 1, if it is removed, we are looking at times 5 or times 10. And we are also told that these unbent fuel particles are carcinogenic. And we all know what carcinogenic means. To break it down, they lead to cancer or they can cause cancer. So experts will tell you that without this particular catalytic converter, you are at risk of having high levels of carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, and hydrocarbon. That is how dire the situation is when this is not in your car.
Nuruddin, in one sentence, why aren't the laws being enforced?
Well, when I spoke to the EPA official, one of the officials at EPA, she was saying that they need to do a lot of education. They need to educate the public. Even though this year some laws were passed. How they will be able to test car emissions. If you are passed, they will give you a certificate which will show that your car is good to be used on the road. But they will still need to create awareness and ensure that people are aware the laws are available or a law has been passed to take off such vehicles from the road, and that would have to take a long time.
Caleb, Ghana does have emissions and roadworthiness laws. Based on what you found, why aren't these measures protecting the air?
From my conversation with someone from the Ghana Standards Authority, from even a private legal practitioner off record, this is why it is complex, okay? For a very long time, our standards, and I'm referring to Ghana standards for vehicle emissions, they were treated as guidelines rather than strictly mandatory laws, okay? Now, the problem now is we already have an existing law, the emissions levy, and we already have an Environmental Protection Act, which was passed even this year. Now, officials from DVLA in previous years was always told that if the car failed an emission test, they could only advise the driver or the owner of the vehicle to fix it. But there was no law to legally impound the car. There was no law to legally deny, roadworthiness of the car. When you go and do roadworthiness, they don't check for catalytic converter. It is never part of the thing they check. You understand? So it is not explicit or specific on the use of catalytic converter. That is where the loophole is. All right? Now, again, this particular law we are talking about will limit, certain gases. But it does not explicitly state again that every car must have a catalytic converter present. Yeah, so this is where the loophole is. And so maybe going forward, if there could be a law that can explicitly state the use of catalytic converters, then we can make progress. Until then, we are back to square one.
Nuruddin, what else can we do to stop the stealing of catalytic converters and stop the pollution?
Well, I think that we should look at how vehicles are being imported into the country. Apart from the fact that these laws must be enforced, the laws that were passed this year must be enforced, we should also look at how vehicles are being imported into the country, how they are being taken from the port. Now, the problem, where we are in this world. In Ghana, once a vehicle comes without a catalytic converter, or if we do not have a way of checking whether these catalytic converters are damaged, they will continue to be fly on the road. The system is not so strong to be able to monitor these vehicles. So if we are able to implement these things, it is likely to reduce. Other than that, we might have the laws, but the enforcement might also be a difficult thing. Yeah.
My guests today were journalists Caleb Ahinako and Mahmoud Mohammed Nuruddin. Their reporting exposes a problem hiding in plain sight, a missing part under our cars, turning engines into open chimneys and streets into shared breathing rooms of toxic air. The irony is painful. Many drivers remove converters to save money, only to spend more on fuel, repairs, and hospital bills. And while enforcement fails, it is traders, children, commuters and mechanics, those who live and work closest to traffic, who inhale the consequences. Clean air, once again, comes down to choices: what we enforce, what we ignore, and what we allow to disappear unnoticed beneath our vehicles. I am Michael Ashali, and this has been Clean Air Report Ghana on Joy 99.7 FM, keeping the conversation on clean air alive, one investigation at a time. Thank you for listening, and remember, every breath counts.